Thank you very much, Idara, and I want to thank everyone for having us here today, especially Idara and Eli for onboarding us and being very hospitable and warm to us. So we're really, really excited to host this session. As Idara mentioned, my name is Tenny. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I founded Making the Move in 2020. Um, but I want to just say, as Idara mentioned, when I moved to Canada in 2008. I have been residing in Hamilton, Ontario for the last 16 years. So that's where I call home. And my own dedication to our Indigenous peoples in Canada is to ensure that I continue to educate those around me on Indigenous history. And I also continue to educate myself as well on Indigenous history in Canada. With that being said, I'm currently in Calgary, Alberta for Calgary Stampede. It's vacation time. So I'm going to, acknowledge the land that I'm currently on, which is located on the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika, Piikani, Kainani First Nations, the Lethka, Nakoda, and Wikatabi First Nations, comprised of the Chiniki, Bearspor, and Wesley First Nations, and the Stutuna First Nation. Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We acknowledge that all Indigenous urban Calgarians who have made this city their home, and on this land and in this place, we strive to learn together, work together, and grow together in a good way. Very different reading the Calgary land acknowledgement, very different from my Hamilton one that I'm very used to saying, but truly honored to be here. So next slide, please. Idara has mentioned our mission is to help newcomers with career transition, and we also support entrepreneurs. And here with me today is my, good partner, Tosin, who will be running through the session, actually coaching on the entrepreneurship side of things as I focus more on personal and one-on-one coaching. So we do have our social media handles. I believe it might be on the next page, where you can follow us, you can scan the QR code, you can follow the website. We're on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and we have more information that you could leverage for the use of building your personal and professional brand. Okay, so with that being said, over to you, Tosin.
Thank you. So, hello everyone. My name is Tosin, pronounced she, her, hers, and I'm really excited to be here. Every time we do these kind of bios and intros, we start ticking off all the I call them slashes, all the titles that we have. But like Idara kind of alluded to, my mantra is helping people recognize their magic, and is what I like to best be remembered by. And so today, I really kind of thought through this session as how do we help you as the founder? And that really is the ethos behind my brand Outer Box, is you as the founder building something, right? So that's a lot of where today's session is coming from. And like Idara said as well, at different moments I'm going to be pausing for questions, and I'd love to hear from everyone in the room. But before we get to that point, I have a question for everyone. What comes to mind when you think of LinkedIn? And feel free to drop it in the chat or quickly just unmute for 2 seconds and say what comes to mind. Let's see. Can I actually see the chat? Okay, so networking, connections, network, community. Love it. Snooze fest, boring. I can't pretend I've never heard that one before. Echo chamber. Yes. Okay, corporate, business, old. Wow. Okay. Love the really authentic responses. For a lot of people, people think of LinkedIn as a job board, which isn't too far from, the person who said corporate. And in many cases, even it ties back into the idea of it being this place that you go to for purely economic reasons, right? But as a founder, I think it's really important that you reshape your perception of LinkedIn, right? And instead of only thinking about it in this world where it's like a recruiting platform or a job board or whatever the case may be, we start to really think of LinkedIn as social media, right? And really think of it in conversations with Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and Pinterest. And I'll admit, okay, I'm not ignorant to kind of the humble brag culture of LinkedIn that is very different from everywhere else. But LinkedIn does have certain features that make it so valuable to any entrepreneur, right? Regardless of industry. And we're going to look at some great examples today. And so, what makes LinkedIn different from other social media platforms? First things first is the extensive information about users and how that helps us generate quality leads. So, for anyone here who's tried advertising or even just creating content on Facebook or Instagram, what you'll find is it's always a mixed bag, right? Like you can very easily like attract an audience and start to grow an audience, but there's no actual way of qualifying those leads and determining, okay, this is who I want. It's a bit more free flowing, right? But with LinkedIn, it's like you literally have, people's work history, know their corporate backgrounds, their location, people who they're also connected to, the interests that they have. It really is unlike any other social media platform out there in the terms of the quality of information you can get about the people that you're connecting with. And then speaking of connections, like everyone kind of said, networking is at the core of the platform's DNA. So people are more receptive to cold contacts, right? Like if you think about the culture of like sliding into DMs, that we would see on like an Instagram, right? Where if you're reaching out to someone you don't know, you've never known before, it's very like bold and brave. With LinkedIn, it's more expected, right? And so if you're someone who's really intentional about networking, it gives you a bit of an edge because it kind of softens the blow, right? And like people are reaching out to people all the time. And then it's the largest online network of professionals. So that makes it great for B2B targeting, right? There's no other social media platform out there. If you're building an enterprise tool, right, that was meant to be for HR professionals or whatever the case may be, like you're not really going to have any other space on the internet where you're able to organically reach these people. So, how can LinkedIn help you grow your brand? There's three main things I want to talk about today. The first one is credibility, right? How LinkedIn helps to give your brand more of a credible outlook. The second is connections and leads, kind of like everyone already alluded to, which is fantastic. And then storytelling, which is an area that I feel is sort of untapped, right? When we think about LinkedIn. So I'll start off talking about credibility. When you think about, social media these days and what it's become for business, a huge part of it is this idea that it's almost a way to verify, right? So if you find out about a brand, you're immediately looking them up. You're looking them up in different places. And sometimes that's LinkedIn, right? Because you're there. And if you, especially for any founder who, again, is trying to make those connections, people are automatically going to go to your company page, see what you have going on there, and make certain judgments about how credible you are, especially as a brand that they might never have heard of before, right? And so, how do you set up your company page? This is Pinterest, which many of you might be familiar with. And it's kind of ironic having a social media platform be on a different social media platform. But irony aside, the key things that Pinterest is doing great that we see here is that profile picture, cover image, headline, the about section, and then the followers and posts, which we'll talk about in the separate sections. So, in terms of your profile picture, you really want it to be a super clear company logo, right? Something that's easily identifiable, easy to decipher. I go there, I know what it is. Yeah. And then with the cover image, this I think is another great way to kind of really up that brand presence. So we want something that's consistent with your company's branding. Again, having that high quality, unpixelated image. It could be an abstract visual. It could be a product picture or collage. It could be a company picture or collage. It could be a relevant statement, like we see with more ocean, less plastic, right? And then starting to get into more of the nitty gritty, like we see with the headlines, right? Like these are different companies. And with these companies, what they do really well is communicating a tangible benefit, being easily digestible, and containing relevant keywords. So here's where we get into the more like search friendly things, right? So when people are looking up certain keywords that are relevant to your company, we want to be able to find you, right? So with Prezi, create attention grabbing presentations being the keyword there. Olaplex, original bond builder that dramatically strengthens, protects, and repairs all hair types. Again, we have hair, bond builder, so the key benefits are being communicated there. So if people are searching for those kind of things, they're able to find it. Open water, we have more ocean, less plastic, hashtag bye bye plastic. Again, very clear benefit there. And then Reverie being the first LGBTQ first streaming entertainment, be a part of our culture. Again, very clear, very digestible. You know exactly what these things are. And then with the about, that's where you can really build on everything that you said in the headline, right? And so again, you want it to be easy to read, necessary context only, and contain relevant keywords. So in terms of connections and leads, I'm going to take a quick break for questions soon, but I'll quickly go over this section because I think everyone here kind of agrees that connections and leads are part of a huge part of what we do on LinkedIn, right? So how do you grow your company's following? The first thing is you want to be posting consistently, and you want the quality of your content to also be consistent. And we'll take a look at some of the different things we can think about when we think of the quality of content. But essentially, one thing I want to call out here is that consistency looks different for everyone. And so if showing up once a week is what's practical for your brand, keep that up. If showing up, multiple times a week is feasible, keep that up. But you want to make sure that every time you're showing up, you're posting quality content that builds your brand's image. The next thing is you want to be encouraging content reshares. So whether that's a call to action in the post itself, or like we'll talk about in a second, through your own personal page, really pushing people to share that content. And it ties also back into the quality of the content, because the higher the quality of the content, the more likely people are to share. And then you want to be optimizing for search. So again, if you're hitting those keywords not only in your profile, but also talking about things that are search friendly in the actual post. Leveraging your network as well is going to be really important, and then sending cold messages. So again, LinkedIn being that platform that is optimized for networking makes it so that you're able to actually reach out to people without having known them before. And then finally, we have joining relevant industry or interest groups. And this is going to be really important, especially as founders, because there's a lot of different groups that exist on LinkedIn that can help you really expand your reach, and you can find like minds and amazing partnerships on there. So what do you do with your personal page as the founder? And I think this is one of the interesting things about LinkedIn, because it really is a 2-for-1 kind of situation, where when you're building as like a small to medium business, it's so important to have a face, and you have to be that face. So the very first thing is you have to be your brand's chief cheerleader, right? If you're not rooting for your brand, who will? So when people think of most small businesses, we're not just thinking about the business itself, we're thinking about that primary phase. And this is true even with like startups or different growth stages, right? You see even like much bigger brands, and now we're even seeing like the likes of like Pinterest, like I gave before, their C-suite execs being active on the platform and active on LinkedIn, because your presence as an individual is going to be able to drive traffic to your page, that being the second point. So you want to be actively sending invitations to your connections so you can drive people to actually engage with your company. Again, you can't really separate the two, right? So if you're a founder that's active on LinkedIn, you really need to think about it as like a two-way street. And then the next thing is you have to actively seek connections that are relevant to your business. Now, sometimes as founders, we have that tendency to think conversion, 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 but we also have to think about like, you know, symbiotic relationships. Maybe it's people you could partner with, maybe it's people that could give you certain levels of exposure or learning or mentorship, whatever the case may be. You need to be actively seeking those people out. And again, LinkedIn being a place that gives you really high quality information. So as you're looking people up, right, you can see kind of what value they may be able to add. You can see the kind of things they talk about and where there may be common ground. And probably my favorite point here is that it adds humanity and credibility to your brand, right? So when people see you and your track record and who you are as a person, it helps everything that you do as a business make more sense, right? And so your role really as that founder is to be that human connection, because your brand can't always be that. Your brand can't always connect with people on that one-to-one. So adding that layer of humanity, your own unique storytelling, your own unique voice, it really does help build your business's profile. And then finally, representing the brand's values. So again, like if there's anything that your brand is loud and proud about, like you as the individual also have to share and that excitement that your brand has, right? So that it makes sense to people, because again, you are that human presence for your brand. So, quick question to everyone in the room. How confident do you feel making connections on LinkedIn? Like right now, how confident do you feel making connections on LinkedIn? Very. Okay. 9 out of 10. Wow, this is a strong group. Probably overly, fairly, very. 4 out of 10. I'm here for Heather. Okay. So, you know what? I have a challenge for everyone here. But before I get into my challenge, I want to pause quickly and take any questions that we have to this point. Confident that I can make them, but maintaining them is different. Okay, so Emma, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I am really appreciating this session, and I am thinking about this question that it sounds like you're about to get into, of maintaining the sort of network development that is a huge potential for founders on LinkedIn. My personal experience was in founding a company, my customers were on Facebook. And so I built a community around Facebook, and I genuinely struggled with. I always at the time said that I was doing business on a slot machine, and I found that it was very difficult for me to maintain the types of business relationships in a virtual environment, especially. And I was thinking specifically. I wonder if you have any tips on if you are in a sort of solopreneur role and you're responsible at the stage that you're in for both generating company content and using LinkedIn as a development tool, that sort of behind the scenes, those people who might not necessarily be your customer, of course, they still need to see your brand presence, but that sort of outreach mechanism. Do you have any tips for juggling that? Because it can feel very difficult in my experience to retain consistency with using a platform like this in both directions simultaneously, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. So, quick question for you, Emma. What industry are you in? Like, what kind of business are you in?
Well, I'm a recovering founder, but I work mostly in sustainability around consumer goods. So I'm really into secondhand retail. And I actually met with Adara. I'm eager to become a mentor here at GLCG. Sorry, I still got to learn the acronym though.
The acronym.
CGLCC. There we go. But yeah, so sustainability, and I would my role tends to be in growth. So I usually am doing the face, the brand, wherever I am.
Okay. I think that's a really good question and something a lot of people struggle with. So you're definitely not alone. And even as someone who is supposed to be an expert, this is definitely something that's still a challenge for me. So I think that's very fair. A few things that could help. One, in terms of the more public facing thing, I highly recommend batch creating. So have you ever heard of batch creating content? No? Okay.
Certainly I have. Yeah, it's just never been my strong suit.
So what I would say is try to, because a lot of times when we think about social media, because of how many kind of thought leaders are there and think pieces are out there, we try to kind of show up in the way everyone else shows up, right? As like, this is what batch creating looks like, or this is what content creation looks like. But I try to personalize my approach as much as I can. And so I was telling some people, so I have ADHD, right? That's a piece of context that might be helpful for you. I have ADHD. I am someone who I'm going to be highly motivated one day, and then the other day it's going to be like completely okay. I had a feeling, Emma. Um, and yeah, so it's something that like makes it so some days I'm on top of it and I'm very there and I'm very present, but then there's other days that I just simply can't hack it. One of the things I do is I have my notes app, and this is going to sound very crude, which is why I started by saying make it what works for you. My notes app on my phone is my best friend as far as content creation is concerned. And so I have what I call my dumping ground, right, in my notes, where I'm throwing all my ideas in there. I'm essentially creating every post in there, right? And some days all I'm able to do is just dump the idea, and that's okay. Some days I'm able to go fully flesh it out, make it into a thing, and that's also fine. And so I would say ride those highs, like in the moments where you're able to like really power through, really create stuff, like do that. On the days where it's, you're not feeling the greatest, I think part of my approach is having some forms of content that are really low lift, right? So there's times where, for instance, I'll have like a picture and a quote, right? And like that might start conversation and that could be cool, but it took me like 5 minutes to put together. So essentially do what works for you and don't feel like you have to have any pressure to show up in one particular way. And then yeah, it's very uncomfortable to just like dump your thoughts, but you need to work through that. And then the other thing that I'd say is these are all best practices, right? And I think most people here can agree that we're not our best every day, and so it's okay. Essentially is my second thing. It's okay if you're not able to be best practice every day. That's fine. The days you can be like the best and show up and do all the things, that's great, right? So I would also say if you could have dedicated time, it doesn't have to be something that you're constantly balancing simultaneously. You don't always have to be following through like in the DMs. I mean, respond to the DMs you get, obviously, but you don't always have to be doing that active outreach while you're actively posting, right? It could be a thing where you carve out time once a month. I'm just going to reach out to people, follow up, and choose maybe 3 5 people a month that you want to like actively meaningfully connect with and follow up on that. Does that help? I hope so.
It does. Thank you.
Perfect.
I want,
Idara.
yeah, I wanted to say, we just have a comment in the chat that says I guess the thing you were, or the process you were just describing, dumping your thoughts out. What is that called? Some
The
either
process of
batch grading or batch dumping. We were just wondering what the
oh,
term
right,
is.
right, right.
Yeah,
I said batch creating
batch
content.
creating. Okay,
Yeah. So you
thank
not do
you.
it like multiple posts at the same time as opposed to thinking of each post each post
Okay,
as a single project. Okay.
thank
So
you.
I'm gonna go ahead and give my challenge to you all at this point. And the challenge is one coffee chat. So in thinking about this session, I was like, I feel like different people that are coming for this are at different points. And you all have proved me wrong so far because I'm seeing people that are like rock stars. Like this is easy for me, right? Like I can reach out to people right from my sleep. I can do this easily. And so I wanted to come up with something that was fair for everyone. And that's one coffee chat with a stranger by the end of July, right? And so what I want everyone to do is decide what is a meaningful connection. What's a gap that you have in your business right now? It could be something you want to learn. It could be, a partnership you want to form, or it could even be like with the aim of converting. So maybe you're in B2B and you're in services, right? I feel like if we think about these things in small, measurable doses, it's easier. And for even the most confident people at networking, finding the time is also a challenge, like we've clearly established. So for everyone, one connection, I want you to get out there on LinkedIn, whatever is most comfortable for you and whatever goal you want to personally set for yourself in terms of the intent of that connection. Find one person that you can set up a coffee chat with. You know, right now it's so much easier with the virtual world. So if we could set up like a Zoom call or a phone call, whatever the case may be, with just one person and let that be a networking goal for the end of the month. Okay? Is everyone down? Are we gonna actually do it? Few nods. Okay. Fantastic. So moving on to storytelling. Like I said, I feel like this is one where we don't talk enough about. What should you actually be posting on LinkedIn? First things first is your brand story and origin, right? Like as founders, we're all passionate. Like it would be easier to just not have to deal with any of this, but we have our reasons why we said, you know what, I want to launch out, I want to go to uncomfortable places and actually build and run a business. So what's the story? What made you do that? What's the origin? There's a lot of content in there. Secondly is the company culture. So for anyone here who's like growing and you're starting to bring on employees and things like that, like Is there any kind of activities that you do with your team? Is there any kind of ideology behind how you're building the culture of your company? We want to hear that. We want you to share. Third is products and services. And I think for a lot of business owners, this is probably the go-to place, the easiest place to just say, like, here's what I'm selling, here's what I have, right? And that's still important. So you want to make sure that's still in the mix. And then any kind of affiliations and programs. For instance, right now I'm beta testing a new kind of product. And so that's something I'll be creating content about, like when the time is right. And then processes and structures. So one thing I've learned, like especially in the service-based business, is that it's not the actual service as much as it's the experience, right? So if you have certain processes and structures in place that impact that consumer experience or customer experience, you want to share that, right? Like what does it look like starting from day one with you till the customer leaves your business, right, and stops engaging? What does that look like? And then finally, causes you care about. So if there's anything that's near and dear to you, so Emma was saying she's in sustainability, like maybe that's an area where you could be creating content around sustainability and the kind of things that you're observing in the space. And so I wanted to take this moment to share a bit of my story. And I'm someone who loves LinkedIn. I know there's a bit of animosity towards LinkedIn in the room, right? But I personally, I really like LinkedIn because among other things, I would say LinkedIn pretty much changed my life. And 4 years ago, I was feeling really frustrated. George Floyd had just been murdered. There was a lot of stuff in the news that wasn't making me too happy. And I was someone who, young professional in my corporate career, and I'd seen certain things that I wasn't too happy with. And at that time, what we were seeing was a lot of people in the advertising industry, a lot of brands, a lot of ad agencies wanting to come out and make a statement about what was happening, but then not actually having any Black employees to make that statement. And I had a previous coworker who said she wasn't interested in writing anything around Black History Month. And that might sound, controversial just like at face value, but she had her good reasons. She said, my voice isn't what needs to be heard right now, right? The people whose voices need to be heard aren't in the room. And that's on you guys, right? Being the companies and all this stuff. And so I took to LinkedIn at that point, feeling helpless, and I was like, what can I do? And I wrote about how I was feeling, and I, made a call. I said, if anyone who is willing to mentor people to help them get into the industry, hit me up. If anyone's looking for mentorship, hit me up. And I'm just going to play matchmaker. And LinkedIn being the platform where, again, the leads are so much better in terms of quality, I was able to reach exactly who I needed to reach. If I posted this on Facebook, I don't think it would have gone the same way. If I posted this on Instagram, I don't think it would have gone the same way. But because this was LinkedIn, I was being found by all sorts of people from the industry, and it kind of went out of control, right? Like what started as just a thing that I was going to do in my LinkedIn DMs turned into a thing that I needed a spreadsheet for, turned into a thing that there was a whole program behind, right? And that's how All Things Add, which is what Idara briefly mentioned when she introduced me, was born, right? And I said, you know what, we're going to have this sort of learning and mentorship platform. Ultimately was able to bring that under a different umbrella, which was I'm doing it. And I won't give you guys all the details right now, but essentially that was monumental for me because it ended up really taking off. Strategy Magazine reached out. Like it was just a crazy time for me where all these people were coming, and it was a risk at the time. I was uncomfortable sharing because at the time, talking about diversity was pretty hush hush and not as mainstream as the conversation is now. And so I was nervous about what impact that would have on my career. I don't know if you've ever heard the stereotype of the angry Black woman, right? And I was like, I don't want to be that person that's known for, and I'd literally seen even the quote unquote angry Black woman of my office be laid off during my career. So I knew it was a scary thing. I was actively job hunting at the time myself. And so I was scared, but I did it and it worked out. And so I'm sharing this because I know a lot of people, especially, I understand that this is a room with a lot of queer entrepreneurs. You have your story, and sometimes it's scary to step out and share what you're passionate about and share what you care about and share what has meaning to you. But I hope my story encourages you to feel like you can do that, even in a corporate setting, even in a professional space. You can be your authentic self. You can share your authentic story, and it doesn't take away from anything you're building as far as like your business and your career, or your entrepreneurial journey. And they're not everyone's going to receive it the best way, but the beauty of platforms like LinkedIn is that you're able to reach your audience. So it might not resonate with everyone, but the people who do are able to engage with you in a way that's that much more meaningful. Okay, so moving on for me, when I think about storytelling and I think about brand communication, I think of it as a loop. And it's not a perfect loop. It's not necessarily always a step by step, but essentially you have to think beyond just the actions you want people to take, right? So a lot of times when people think about showing up on social media, on any kind of platform, this isn't unique to LinkedIn, but anywhere on social media, we're very kind of narrow-minded sometimes, where it's like, I want to show up and I want to get customers. I want to show up and I want to get like partners or volunteers, and you're just thinking about that action. But at the end of the day, you have to meet your audience in different forms before they get to the point of conversion. And so sometimes that could be inspirational, right? You're inspiring people. Sometimes it could be entertaining. Sometimes it could be educating. And then ultimately, these things might happen multiple times, right? You might inspire someone many times before they finally convert, or entertain them before they finally convert. But ultimately, the goal is to convert. But without the upfront work of meaningfully engaging with them, you're not going to convert, right? And so I want to do a bit of a case study with this brand, Barbette. I don't know if anyone knows the brand, but when I think of successful small businesses, especially in terms of showing up online, they are pretty top of mind for me. Founder Andrea, she's fantastic. Again, this two-way street that I was talking about in terms of a founder profile and a company profile, and just seeing that synergy. You can see even on her own personal profile, Andrea has um, her even her profile picture, right? She's really repping her brand there with the tote. And we see the cover image that she has is literally the same as the brand. And so she really is that face of Barbette. And I think Barbette as a brand does use social media and LinkedIn specifically really well. And I felt this example would be great because, again, with LinkedIn, we always think of B2B, but this is a consumer good, right? Like she's selling drinks. And we don't always think about that when we think of LinkedIn, but I think they do a really good job and it works really well. So, in terms of inspiring, right? Like, how do you inspire through your content? This is when your content is able to spark new ideas and ways of thinking. And so it could be motivational quotes, which they're tired, they're boring, sometimes. But there's times where if you're able to do it in a way that's authentic and more relatable, then you can have that impact that you're looking to have. Another way is new ways to use your product or your product category. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Mr. Clean ads that they've been running, where you use like the dry eraser to clean your shoes. But that was a way of using Mr. Clean that I never thought about. So that's like an inspirational layer, right, to their brand. And so you can also have like problem plus your product as a solution, or success stories, whether that's like personal success stories in building your brand, or success stories in terms of people who've used your products, whatever the case may be. And one way that Barbette does this really well is in terms of thinking about sobriety, because their brand essentially is non-alcoholic drinks. And so they really live that and they own it, right? So one example here is dry or damp. This year we're calling for less why aren't you drinking and more what are you drinking, I'll take two. And they go on to talk about their campaign Drink Freely that they're running for dry January and dry February and damp February. Essentially, again, just going back to this idea that the question, why aren't you drinking, is something that's annoying for people who are trying to be sober because, you know, I'm drinking, I'm just not drinking alcohol, right? And so it's inspirational in that lens of just like, let's reshape how we think about sobriety and let's have like a more fun approach. And so it's something people can easily connect to. And then educational. So content that teaches new ways of doing things or simplifies processes. So what this content could look like is like a step-by-step guide, a tutorial, ways to use your product. the impact of not solving the problem your product solves. So for instance, like with Barbette, it could be something around the impact of like excessive alcohol, right? Like just as an example. And then it could even be as simply as where to find information relevant to the problem you solve. So again, going back to the sobriety example, if there's any kind of like journals or references that people might want to dig into, you can like show them that. So the example I have here with Barbette is solo dining is on the rise. Would you grab a meal alone? We check out the history of solo dining and how being alone isn't actually lonely. So this is something that's more educational. And I think one of the great things they've done here is they actually driving to their website. So they've given you the premise, right? And if this is something you want to learn more about, you go to their website. Again, thinking about that journey of sometimes you might educate and then it leads into like conversion. They're able to continue that journey with with the customer by driving to their site, right? And on the way there, the customer is actually learning something new. And then we have entertain. So content that is fascinating, humorous, or relatable. So we have like scenarios or skits, insider jokes, commentary. With this one, it's interesting and it could be a slippery slope. But the fundamental thing is that you want to be authentic with this because one thing we see and is one thing that's always see through is when a brand is just hopping onto a trend without doing any kind of meaningful thinking as to how to make it their own. So with your entertaining content, you want to make sure that it's authentic to your brand. Not everything applies to every brand depending on the brand personality, but for the Barbette example, they started doing this thing where they would interview different people and they made these really like, I wish I could show the video actually, but essentially like very dinner party-esque video, and it's not for everyone, but it's authentic to their brand. And so in this example, they were interviewing someone, and they did like the 22 questions with the person, which for anyone who's kind of into like fashion and more like high-end magazines, like I think it's Vogue that has 37 questions, and there's a few. I think Elle has a different version of that. Essentially, it's a play on, you know, a format that works and that people are typically entertained by, and they've made it their own and stayed true to their brand in doing so. And so, if it might feel random, but it's that entertaining content. It's content that I want to see, regardless of whether or not I'm interested in their product. And finally, we have conversion. So, content that motivates action. So, this could be a promotional offer or a product benefit, time bound offering, new product announcement, product upgrades. And so, like I said, Barbette uses LinkedIn really well because we see like a true balance of all these different kinds of content. And when the time when it's appropriate, they actually will highlight certain products or really push for action. So one example is, remember how I said they had their whole like dry and damp February campaign that they ran. They had a special can that they had, right? And so that was something to promote, like, here's a can that we have, limited time only, right? And then they also have, and this is another good example of that, you know, 2-for-1, where you see the founder making commentary and it ties back into what the brand is doing. So Andrea, the founder of the brand, was going to be walking around Toronto with some samples and like merch. And so we see the brand account kind of reposting that with their own commentary, being like, if you're around tomorrow, stop by Bevis in Kensington Market and grab a sample. Right. So it's really motivating that action, very time bound, very simple action that they want people to take. And it's effective for that reason because of how simple it is. So that's pretty much everything that I felt like we should kind of go through in terms of getting you guys to start to think of things you can start to do right away. So I'll take questions before we officially wrap up.
So there were a few comments in the chat. Uh, for example, like when you talked about meeting someone or making one connection in the next month, there was a question about like what could be the tips for the chat to have with that person. There's also a question about like what kind of content do you think does best on LinkedIn? And then there's one more question that just asks, or a comment that's curious to know your opinion. If you think, personal pages do better than professional pages. And there's a note here that says, I have seen many successful founders posting content from their profile and then using their company page to conduct a paid promotion of the profile, of the personal profile content. Just some notes.
Different things in there. So I'll start off with the personal and professional. Yes, there's definitely different ways to like run ads, and I think that that's one kind of approach that works like that. Like again, the 2-for-1, the founder says something and then the brand uses it for promotion. It's something that um we've actually done. I've seen done for like a client of mine. So yeah, definitely works, especially with I think events. So if your brand is ever doing anything where it's a webinar, right, to attract leads or a sampling or whatever the case may be, it's really nice to see like an actual person who's going to be at that event talk about the event, and then the brand reposts it and can run the ad that way. I would also say, in terms of what performs better between the personal and professional, usually it's going to be the personal. Like, I think one thing to think about with LinkedIn is you're not necessarily going to attract as many people as you would in Facebook or Instagram. But the beauty is the quality of the leads, right? Like, you're not really seeing that anywhere else in terms of those really high quality leads, people that are there for exactly what you're offering. So that's the beauty of LinkedIn. And so I wouldn't necessarily compare the professional and personal. And honestly, like I think that's something that we see on any platform, right? Like your personal Instagram, in many cases, if it's a public account, would do better than a professional account, provide like if we're speaking purely organically. So unless you're putting paid media, like paid budget behind your posts, your company post isn't typically going to do as well as your personal post. But again, beauty of LinkedIn is that you can really do the two simultaneously and use one to kind of boost the other. And then tips for that coffee chat. So here's my personal recipe. My first thing is you want to be super concise when you're reaching out to someone for the first time. If you give like a long thing, like if I go on my LinkedIn throughout my day and I see like a long message, I'm gonna procrastinate. Most of us are gonna procrastinate. Like, I don't want to deal with this right now. And it's tempting to do that because you have so much context you want to give, but you really want to work on being able to say the most important things. And then if you are able to attract that person and bring them in, then you give the added context. So keep it really simple. I'd also say the best approach is to understand that nothing ever has 100% conversion rate, right? So if you put out an ad and it reaches 1,000 people, 1,000 people aren't going to buy. So same approach to like networking. When you're reaching out to people, the first person you reach out to might answer, but like what's the probability, right? So if you're trying to get one coffee chat, don't reach out to one person, right? Like out to multiple people to increase those chances. And I would also say you want to be your authentic self. So like be you, be chill. Like I think sometimes we forget that because it's such a professional environment, we think, we have to show up like super professional, super corporate. And by all means, like, be friendly and be respectful and all that stuff. And don't act like you know someone that you don't know. But you also, it's not an email, right? Like it's not the same. Like people are able to see your profile if they want to and like just see you as a person. So don't overthink it as well. Yeah. Those are my tips. Oh, actually, I have one more. You want to have a really clear ask. That's probably the most important one. So if you're reaching out to someone for the first time, they need to know why you're in their DMs, right? So be super clear and remember what I said. So if you're just trying to learn about something and learn about the person's story, like say that, like, I've seen that you've worked on this, I've seen that you've done this. Super curious about your story. Are you open to chatting, like, and fostering a connection that way? right? So if mystery doesn't work when you're dealing with strangers, right? It's almost the opposite effect. Okay, and then what type of content does best on LinkedIn? Short versus longer videos, short versus longer blogs, images versus single images. I would say with LinkedIn, you always want to do what works best for the message you're trying to pass, right? I think Facebook, especially, is the big culprit that has conditioned us to have 1,000,010 best practice specifications that change every day, right? Like I have a running joke that if Mosseri, the founder of the CEO of Instagram, comes out with one more Instagram live telling us best practices again, I'm going to throw something at my phone. So I would say with LinkedIn, it's a bit different. LinkedIn doesn't like the algorithm isn't like as, you know, clickbaity as other platforms. LinkedIn's strategy, according to them, has been prioritizing original thought. So on LinkedIn, you have a lot of people that are just kind of regurgitating information they've picked up elsewhere. LinkedIn claims, again, none of us really see the back end of the algorithms or anything, but they claim that they really want to push people who have new ideas and new information to share. So I would say whatever kind of media you're attaching to, so first of all, you want to make sure prioritize what you're writing, right? Like the caption. So on like a platform like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, where it's the actual video or picture that's like the important thing, and then the caption is the afterthought. With LinkedIn, it's a bit reversed. The actual post is more important, and then the media should amplify that. And so you just want to make sure that whatever you're doing, it's a clear story. In terms of short or long, any platform where people are scrolling, I'm always going to lean shorter better, right? Except TikTok. TikTok now is a bit different, but we're not here to talk about TikTok. Um, so if you could keep it shorter because of the nature of the platform and the fact that people are constantly scrolling, that would be more ideal. And then carousels I think are fine. So single image versus like group of images doesn't really matter in my opinion. Okay, did I get everything? Was there any other?
Yes, I think you got everything there. Thank you. Yeah, okay, so Tenny just dropped a LinkedIn chat in the sorry, a link in the chat. What I want to do now in terms of wrapping up, thank you so much to Tenny and Tosing for facilitating and leading this session. Their contact information can be found, I believe, at the link on LinkedIn and right here on the screen as well. So please feel free to connect with them. Um, in terms of, I just want to, before we kind of head out, share a few things that are going on at CGLCC. So Tenny and Tosin, is it fine if I take over sharing screen for just a second?
Of course.
Okay.
And I was just going to say before you give your announcements, thank you so much for having me. This was great. And the questions and comments are always super welcome. You're a super engaging group. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, so just want to include here a quick contact for the mentorship team. The Out for Business mentorship program for the 2024/2025 cohorts will be opening within the next week. So please feel free to keep an eye on the webpage or to contact Eli and I at these email addresses provided. You can also just quickly scan the screen here to be taken to our interest form. So once the application is open, we would send that to you directly so you don't miss that. So please feel free to take a look at that. I also do want to mention that there is the webinar Wednesdays that's happening tomorrow at 2 p.m. So EDT, and that is going to focus on unlocking like financial potential strategies for funding business. So with the focus on understanding financing options, crafting compelling pitches, and building investor relationships. So just want to kind of have those two things on your radar for going forward. I will stop sharing now. And I just want to again thank you to Tosi and Tenny for being here. And yeah, let me just see if there's any last minute chats or last minute notes in the chat. Let's see. Yes, thank you for dropping the link there, Vanessa, for the session for tomorrow. Okay, awesome. In that case, have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much. We would likely reach out with some feedback information as well. So take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.